Hello, I'm James Cridland, the radio futurologist, and this is Radioland, my international radio trends newsletter. You can get it at radioland.email. And this podcast is sponsored by RSS.com. If you've heard ads in this podcast, then you can get rid of them in Apple Podcasts by following the link to become a supporter and listen ad-free. But RSS.com sells the ads in here, and you can do that too and earn money from your podcasts as well. Just visit RSS.com to learn more. Now, one half of the Kyle and Jackie O show, Kyle Sandilands, has accepted a settlement from former employer ARN and announced his new media vehicle. Kyle was looking for $85 million, but is to settle for $12 million, which is still not nothing. He gets $3 million next month, then $275,000 monthly until June 2029. He can't work with other radio broadcasters until March next year, and frankly they're unlikely to want to touch him anyway. Mr. Sandilands and his related entities will not be providing services to ARN in any capacity going forward, the stock market announcement clarifies, possibly for jittery brands who want to avoid any association with the shock jock, or as a peace offering to the mad fudging witches who have been campaigning quite successfully against Kyle Sandilands and Jackie O. But Sandilands will be able to do work online, or independent media opportunities as they're known, and in an exclusive interview on the Game Changers radio podcast, which is well worth a listen by the way, he's announced that he will be doing an online subscription show in audio and video every morning between 6 and 10. So up against ARN and those other radio stations doing breakfast. Not only that, ARN will help promote it to the tune of $1.5 million, and ARN will also get 20% of all revenue after an initial threshold. It's an astonishingly good deal for ARN, one that the company can afford, but also one with significant commercial upsides for them as well. So Kyle has essentially been kicked off FM radio for the time being and will be doing a live show online instead. I don't want to call myself a radio futurologist or anything, but I did propose this very idea in October last year. It was roundly dismissed by commentators and podcasters everywhere, of course. But will his subscription service actually work? The radio world is littered with people who left commercial radio and believe their own hype enough to try and launch a subscription service. I've linked to one in the newsletter from 2005 featuring Paul Gambaccini, Tony Blackburn and Virgin Radio's Daryl Denham. It is fraught with difficulty, not least the rights issues around playing music, which Sandilands says is going to be part of the show. Howard Stern was successful in his move from FM to satellite radio, but he was one channel in 150. Sandilands says he needs 50,000 paid subscribers to cover costs. We don't know the subscription fee he's planning, but if it's $4.99, then that's $250,000 per month. The show will also, he says, be ad-free, although that doesn't mean it won't carry sponsorships or other brand activity. Across all platforms, KISS in Sydney and Melbourne had 1.1 million listeners each week for breakfast. Kyle's show on KISS had 96,000 online listeners a week. Would half of those pay to listen to Kyle instead? Would some of the 291,000 listeners to the podcast also pay up? His investors apparently think so, and have told him that he could get 500,000 or even 1 million listeners. Would ARN's iHeartRadio be used as a method to listen or watch if ARN is to get 20% of the revenue? Well, given the app is made in the US, is it even capable of a bespoke subscription product for a population smaller than that of Texas? Never short of a reason to get us all talking about him. I've been on Nine's Today Show twice over the last 2 days as a radio commentator. I've got links to those in the newsletter. Kyle has also professed a love for One Nation, the populist far-right hate-fueled Australian political party that is mostly funded by millionaires. Accepting raw publicity, part of this might be a desire to get closer to those millionaires for funding for his new venture. Part of it could be a realisation that right-leaning media seems to work better in Australia and other countries. After all, George Orwell's 2 Minutes Hate It's the sort of feature you could imagine on 2GB every day. It strikes me that the kinds of brands who'd spend money with someone like Kyle are similar brands to those who would want to fund One Nation anyway. The ACMA says that only 8% of Australians listen to streaming radio. Will Sandilands be the person to change all of that? Well, we'll have to wait and see. Now the stats, and there's the UK's DAB station Wave Up Radio, which broadcasts on the East London and Essex DAB multiplex. The website, when I visited, claimed in its footer that it's the most popular radio station in the UK. It isn't. It published an address of 123 Diversity Street, London, which doesn't exist. And it has a listener count, proudly claiming that you are listener 20,827, which almost instantly changes to 20,346, and then slowly and naturally goes up or down by a random number up to 6 every 4 seconds. That's all worked out by code in the website, which is very visible, and that code is called fake counting. At least the name of the function is honest. 20,000 concurrent listeners, by the way, would be very good if it were true. The station is owned by a company called Prime Vortex Holdings Limited. It's run by a man called Samuel Akoto, BSc Ons, who lives in Brentwood. UK company law requires a truthful address, VAT number and other things on websites. I contacted him for comment, and Akoto tells me that the website designer made up the address and the most popular claim, but that the listener count had, quote, gone into error mode. And that too isn't true. One of the things I speak about a lot in radio conferences is the opportunity to get out of the radio studio, and there's research backing up a desire from your listeners to personally connect with radio personalities. Radioland reader Buzz points me to CBC in Canada, which periodically does what they call a walking show, a live show walking through a particular neighbourhood. I've linked to video of one of them walking through a part of Evanston in Alberta hit by a hailstorm a while ago. It's a really nice idea and well worth a look to see if it would work for your station as well. Another example, Jim Hawkins, who used to be on BBC Radio Shropshire before budget cuts meant the end of the show, regularly sat on a bench in a local park and recorded stories to air the next day. The benefit, of course, of doing something pre-recorded is that it's technically easier, but also you can give your guests enough time to tell their families and friends that they will be on the radio. He now does that in his Hello You podcast, which is worth a listen. Now, AM Deathwatch Corner and BBC Radio 5 Live is due to turn off its AM transmitter network by December 2027. They've got 23 transmitters across the UK. The station is beginning to turn transmitters off at the end of next month, and the first to go are Redruth in Cornwall and Folkestone in Kent. And Public Radio Deathwatch, which is a new, I hope it's not a regular one, but anyway, it's a new feature for this. In the UK, the BBC has announced 550 job cuts. It'll particularly impact BBC Radio 4. The World Tonight will go to be replaced by NewsHour from the BBC World Service, which is a service that the BBC wants the government to wholly pay for, which is going to be interesting to see quite how that works if it's going to be an hour on BBC Radio 4 at 10 o'clock at night. Anyway, the Today programme will also lose a presenter, leaving only 4. 3 more than LBC's Nick Ferrari, 2 more than Times Radio, but still only 4. And some TV shows will also go. The cuts announced are only half the cuts we're going to get this year. And should you want fresh evidence of how appalling the BBC's HR team is, I've linked to somebody that has pointed out his treatment under the BBC's HR, which I think is the world's worst HR department. In Belgium, RTBF Jam, which plays alternative and new music, is to come off DAB Plus in July. You'll be able to listen on RTBF Orvio, the broadcaster's proprietary app. In Germany, MDR Classic is to come off DAB Plus in October. It's a classical music station. And it's part of a government ruling requiring public radio to reduce the number of channels it transmits. The Leipzig station will be replaced on DAB Plus by the public station BR Classic from Munich. And in Australia, the far-right leader of One Nation, Pauline Hanson, made a speech where she announced she would close the SBS, there's no need for it anymore, she says, and make the ABC a subscription service in most parts of the country. She's not given any further details of how that works. I suspect it's because she isn't clever enough to have any. And I put Pod News into video on Friday since I had a little bit of time to fiddle about. And what I'd like to do is to automate the on-screen graphics. So a typical Pod News story is a paragraph with a link, the text of which doubles as the headline. And I'd quite like to do the following. I'd like to record it in video, then do a transcript of the video to compare with the original for the links and the headlines. So you can do that, I think, pretty well easily enough. Then automatically overlay those timed headlines and a screen grab of the story using some piece of software. I was curious to find out whether anybody had attempted that or something similar. There must be some software somewhere that automatically adds overlays to a template or something. I know that the World Cup overlays are all just XML based stuff. And if anybody has any open software that they would like to point me to, I would be very grateful. james@crid.land is my email address. Speaking next, I am at Radio Days Asia, which is in Jakarta in Indonesia. You can buy your tickets now. RadioDaysAsia.com is where to do that. I will be keynoting on radio's international trends and its future, which is people-powered. And I'm also speaking, I hope, at Podcast Movement in New York City. From September the 14th to the 18th. I'm there all week. I've booked my flights. I've booked the hotel. Very much looking forward to spending a little bit of time in New York. If anybody knows how I can get into The Daily Show to watch that getting recorded, it's 2 blocks away. So I'd like to do that. If anybody has any ideas, again, please drop me an email. Thank you to the various supporters of my newsletter and of this podcast. Broadcast Radio, Media Results Inc., Radio Today in the UK, Admaster.info, and Clyde Broadcast, the radio people. Thank you to you and others for your support, as well as personal supporters Daffith Furnham, Marty from New York, Gavin Watson, Greg Strassel, Sam Phelps, Richard Hilton, Emma Gibbs, Jocelyn Abbey, and James Masterton for being regular supporters. If you would like to join them, buymeacoffee.com/James Cridland is where to go for that. And there's also a newsletter version of this podcast, radioland.email. If you would like to get that, that would be good. I'm on Mastodon if you would like to follow me there. James@bne.social is my account there, and my website has more details about who I am and what I do, and whether I can help you further. That's at james.cridland.net. And until next time, keep listening.